Hello, Sean here, Mountains Garage. On a slightly overcast Friday afternoon, the air the last few days has moderated. It's actually getting down in the high 50s at night. Excellent for sleeping with the window open. The humidity 2 days ago, I walked out of the house, had to run a few errands, and I thought the air felt a lot better. So I decided, because it's been raining for the last month and a half, to take the 55 Chevy, the black one. Initially, I was going to take my air-conditioned car, but I could drive that in the wintertime. I have to drive that in the wintertime. You've only got so many decent days or so many months of available good weather. Unfortunately, this year, a lot of that has been impacted by rain, but hey, you gotta, make hay while the sun shines, as they say. So I decided to head off in the 55 Chevy. I haven't reported back on it since I spent some time working on it, the black hardtop. I did quite a bit of work to it and then just started driving it. And then the weather turned bad. So this was the hottest day I've driven the car since I've owned it. And I learned, not very far into my journey, about the time my rear Mickey Thompson Sportsman bias tires, 29-12-5, they fill out the wheel well, awesome, I love the look, but they're oval for the first 10 miles. But it was warm enough, and they warmed up quickly and smoothed out. It only vibrates about 42 miles an hour, if I can believe the dash. So, about that time, when the tires rounded up and I'm whistling along 50, 60 miles an hour, that I am overcome by heat. I am sitting in an easy bake oven. The air outside the window feels cool on my arm. The air I'm sitting in the car is awful. And it only got worse. I had to go down into the belly of the beast, a couple towns where the traffic's really busy. A lot of red lights, construction. And I was cooking. I mean, it was still enjoyable. I love driving the thing. All the work I did, the motor's not falling out of it, this front suspension now handles nice. It's fun driving a car that low. I mean, I have to jack it up to put my lift arms under it. You'd think you'd hit everything, but you don't. The only even tire rub I have is if I go fast around a right-hand corner, somehow the right rear tire hits the inside of the wheel well somewhere, so you can just hear it lightly touch. And I know not to go. I'm talking if you really whip around a sharp corner like in traffic and there's a transition or something. So it's only happened once. Excuse me. I need to go get a drink. It's actually cooler outside than it is in the shop here today. So on my short list, the next time I bring the 55 hardtop, the black one, back inside, I need to insulate the floor either with the stick-on mat stuff or the lizard skin. I have to do something to mitigate the heat. And I also seem to be getting, even in traffic, because it gets worse, but you can almost feel hot air moving, like the air off the radiator is coming through the firewall somehow too. So I'll look into that further. So anyway, it's still a fun ride. Made it back, no problem. The modifications I did in the trunk, so I can park it in the garage without it smelling bad, I just popped the trunk. I put a knife switch on the battery negative, so I can just disconnect that because I don't trust old wiring. And the valve on the vent, if you're not following along, the car will run with the only vent being the filler tube and the tiny hole in the filler cap. That's the way it came to me. I thought I should vent it. I ran a vent down through the trunk, and then the overwhelming gas smell when you park it would permeate into the house. So now when I park it inside, I disconnect the battery with a knife switch and shut the hand valve on the vent, and we're good. So that's that. To finish out the afternoon, again, the temperature had moderated some, so I had a couple hours the last couple days, and I welded in my shelf on this bench. I had to weld the supports in because I wanted it super strong, and I welded the 14 gauge on the upper shelf. I added another trailer hitch receiver on that side, and I put the T-handle underneath to take the slop out of it. I figured I got the welder out, and I had bought more of those because I wasn't expecting to have a bunch of new benches. adding receiver hitches on. I bought receiver hitches to weld onto my trailers that I got last fall so I can move my winch around. So I had to buy more to actually accomplish that because I keep sticking them on benches because they're so handy. All the tools I have slide in, most of them anyway, that you don't use all the time, even the vices. So anyway, I rolled it outside, and while I was at Walmart last week doing something, all they had for Rust-Oleum, this 2X Alpha cover, works pretty good. I like the satin olive. That's what the other bench is. I think it's kind of tasteful, looks kind of military-ish. It doesn't really jump out as being anything, it just kind of blends in, earthy color. They had satin seaweed, which I now have learned, if you look at it, if you've ever seen a faded John Deere tractor, at first I really didn't like the color, then I realized it was kind of faded John Deere color, so not exactly like the cap color-wise, but hey, it's on there. It's painted, and now it's actually ready to use. I hated that I couldn't roll it around and didn't have shelves, and it wasn't really finished. So now, for now, unless I add more to it, I'm calling this one finished. And now to the welding bench, the one with all the holes in it. I also added another receiver yesterday while I was modifying them. You gotta weld the nut in the, you gotta drill a hole, weld the nut in the bottom, make a T-handled rig out of a 1/2-inch bolt. That's what I use anyway. My local surplus store, they have unplated nuts, and I buy a bunch of 1/2-inch coarse nuts. That's what I use to weld onto broken studs and whatnot, like in an LS head. I like the size of them. They're big and sturdy. You can get quite a bit of weld in the middle, and they're not plated, so you're not eating galvanized. So in this case, all I had was galvanized bolts, so I grind the head off. And it's the first time I used my clamps and stuff with the holes to actually fixture the thing up. I did 2 of them side by side. At the end, I'll actually stick a picture of that because I was so excited I took a picture of it. And it was easy to tack it up and then release the clamp and go ahead and weld it all up and then weld it on the bench. I didn't move the bench at all. I forgot to mention I had welded the bottom shelf on the John Deere green bench because it was so close to the floor, but while I was welding on it yesterday, putting the shelf in, I used a floor jack, jacking up on the long end. I jacked it up as high as I could, laid it underneath and welded all that stuff too, so that worked really well. And I welded the receiver on that bench while it was up in the air like that. But it's just as easy once I get my welding setting down on my MIG welder to weld overhead. You just need more wire speed. If you take your normal setting that you use on the bench and you want to go over your head, you got to give it, to me, another number of wire speed, and then you can pretty much weld normal without it, you know, dropping off in balls. So I welded this one on too, painted it up. I had some satin olive left, enough to do this anyway. So next time I'm buying paint, I'll know which one I like and which one I really don't. So that makes all 3 new benches that I have. They each have 2 receiver hitches on them, which is really handy. Again, I've covered that. So I was watching another video where a guy had a bench like this, a welding bench with all the holes, and he had a smaller piece of metal to probably protect the holes and stuff when you're just doing repetitive welding or pretty much anything. So I thought maybe I had a piece laying around. It would be easy to source. And like all things on our phones that keep track of our life, as soon as I did that, next time I opened eBay, I'm looking at pizza pans, unseasoned and seasoned. So I bought an unseasoned pizza pan. It's 1/4 inch. It came with rounded corners and came with this finger hole in it. So, I mean, I don't know if you use them in a brick oven or what they're for. They come in different sizes. This one's 14 by 16, but it's raw steel. I didn't want it seasoned, although it might smell good while I'm welding on it. I can do my own seasoning. I'm actually rubbing oil on it to keep it from rusting. Every time I have a transmission apart and I have a rag full of oil, you know, ATF is really good. It soaks in nice, so I just rub it all over in there. I don't want it to rust. because I'm thrifty like that. So it just so happens this finger hole was almost, I mean, it was punched out. If it was drilled, it would have fit, but the same size as the big part of these little stops. And now it anchors it right there without doing a whole lot. You can obviously put a clamp on it to hold it, either style of clamp. You could put it on the bench up against these if you wanted to, but it took about 3 spins around my die grinder, and now it actually fixtures right into the bench. And I'll use it for small welding jobs. It'd be easier to fix or replace this than the bench itself. Now, I'm not super worried if I was to work right on the bench. In fact, I chose the side that had like a hole started right there. It's just scratched where there's a circle right there. I always put the rough side toward me because all your work you're going to do for the most part on your bench is going to happen here. And the rest is just going to be stuff most of the time. So your heart of your work is happening right here. And I can grind and sand, and I'd be 25 lifetimes trying to wear through this so it wasn't usable. But me being me, I thought this was a good idea, mostly because I saw somebody else doing it. So guilty as charged. This bench, the one that started the craze, was well used, all rusty, probably been outside. It was used in the sandblasting building. It's rough. Again, the roughest side I put toward me where I'm going to work because it's going to get beat up anyway. Like I've mentioned, every video contains an old sock and a mistake, at least one of each. That's an oily sock with transmission fluid on it. This bench wants to rust. It came rusty. I sanded it all off. Every time I turn my back, it wants to rust. So I'm always rubbing oil on it. And that's working so far. You can see one spot. It looks drier than the rest. It really wants to rust right there. So I could put something else on it, but right now it's a fun little battle we're having to see who's going to win. So this bench now that it does have the 2 receivers. I actually made these ones. The afternoon I got it, I was so excited about this, just having one roll around bench. The reason I wanted them, and you can see they're in position now, is my long-term projects are usually on the lift. I'm always walking somewhere to a bench, so the welding bench is going to stay where it is. I got the feet down. It's not going to roll. It can roll if it has to, but it doesn't have to go anywhere. These are all both mobile. The car goes up and down on both situations. They're right in front of the door. You get lots of natural light. And when you're working on your project, you got a bench right there. Otherwise, I'm walking to my big bench all the time, and that's 50 feet. So, granted, I do need the exercise, but you know what I'm saying. Nice to have space. And my goal for the mobile ones, that one has 2 empty shelves. Check back with me in 6 months. I probably got everything stuffed on there. But my goal is to have it like a crash cart, if you will. All the parts for your project that's clogging up your lift are going to live on the shelves under the bench. Clearly, this one needs shelves. So I'm going to put a probably diamond plate on the bottom and then make another tier out of square tubing and put probably the 14 gauge again up here because I have it. So this will eventually get 2 shelves like the rest of them. So that pretty much, thank God, he says, we're not going to talk about any more benches at the moment. And now on to this awful mess, which is my big bench. I have 2 Turbo 400s tore apart over in this corner, and over here, as promised, there's some 4L80E content coming. I've only done a little information on them in the past, so I'm going to try to start systematically as best I can. So probably the first video on the 4L80E, probably the next video I make, is going to be just an overview, if you will, a flyover. So pertinent information, interchangeability, etc. So thanks for tuning in. It's Friday. Hope you're going to have a great weekend, whatever you're going to do. And I'll catch you soon.